Today's Chalice lighting has been adapted from John Gibb Millspaugh. Leave aside the little thoughts that distract you. For this place, this digital place in which we meet, along with the living rooms and bedrooms and personal spaces where you view this, like all places, is a holy place. And now, like all times, is a holy time. Join with this community of seekers, and together, let us find.
So the struggle is absolutely real, folks. This is my struggle face, if you couldn't tell. And by struggle, I mean that the big serious struggles, as well as the little annoying struggles, they're all around us right now. We're at this unprecedented time in an unprecedented situation, which is a lot. Our anxieties, our frustrations, our nerves, our cabin fever, all of these have taken up way more mental space than they normally would. And it's no surprise, because we're all facing an extremely uncertain world. So, welcome. Welcome to worship this morning. Today, our hope is to actually go and visit some old friends. Certainly these are old friends of mine, as well as I hope to some of you. We're going to go back and revisit the Stoic philosophers. So, Stoic philosophy has a lot to offer us right now, because Stoic philosophy is all about the idea that we have in our reason and our will significant and meaningful resources that can help us in all of those situations where we are scared and anxious and uncertain about the future. So my hope is that if we go back to hear what they had to say, maybe they can offer us some comfort and some insight into what is at the front of our minds right now, this morning, and certainly going into these coming weeks. So with all of that, welcome. Oh, hey there. So, one of the things I particularly love about being part of the UUCC family is that I don't have to be quiet about the fact that Some of my best friends are books, and it's nice to be able to let your nerd flag fly from time to time. And of course, these days, it's difficult to be able to find time with your friends. So if your good friends are books, it's really easy because you can hang out with them. You don't even have to wear a mask while they're hanging out with you. One of the reasons it's so good to talk to friends, especially in times of struggle and anxiety, is that friends can share their own experience, their wisdom, their resources for getting through it. And that's why I'm particularly thrilled that Stoic philosophers are my friends. Like the intellectual Seneca. This is the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius, and his teacher, who was also a slave earlier in his life, Accpetance. These are some philosopher friends, and I really value them because they have some really important advice to share. Even more than that, they have a kind of courage and bravery that I really appreciate, especially even, in these moments when courage and bravery seem really important. Because even if you can't do everything they suggest, or if you aren't quite as brave as they are, it's still good that you could have them with you, kind of talking to you in your head. One of the reasons I actually think they have so much to teach us is because, as a group, they often had to deal with something that's almost like the exact opposite of what we're dealing with right now. We're all in a situation where we've been asked to stay in our homes, to self-isolate in a way that sort of takes us out of the world. So in the year 71 CE, so this is during the Roman Empire, the Roman Emperor Vespasian actually exiled all philosophers from the city of Rome, which meant that the Stoic philosophers who were around at the time had to do almost the exact opposite of what we're doing. They couldn't go home. They had to leave. And some of them even were arrested and sent to places that were very, very far away from their families, from their friends, from anyone they knew. So instead of having to stay home, they actually weren't ever allowed to return home. It was like they were in a reverse quarantine. So these are useful friends to have when you're feeling overwhelmed by the world, because these are people who have seen their fair share of struggle themselves. Now, Stoics taught and thought a lot about a lot of things. But one of their most important messages was actually about how we live our day-to-day lives. They advocated for this very pragmatic and kind of even-keeled approach to living. And they tried to teach their students of philosophy that they should live in ways that were kind of in balance with the world, that people be not overly ambitious or overly passive, that they maximize the good for everyone who was around them. And they had a particular way of thinking about living in the really complex world in which they existed, and I think it's relevant for the world we live in too. They actually imagined the world as two circles. One very large circle, and this represented kind of the world at large. And then on top of that, there was a smaller circle inside of it. The bigger circle was all the things that were happening in the world that were out of the control of any one individual. Okay, so things like the weather, whatever the government was doing at the time, whether or not a war was being fought, what other people around you might be doing, whether food was available or how expensive like fuel was or something like that. That's the big circle. That's the world that we all have to experience and navigate and deal with. But Stoics said we should spend more time focusing on the small circle. And the small circle for the Stoics was the sphere of things that are in our personal control. Things like how we respond to difficulties, how much importance and investment we place on our desires and our comforts, how resilient and ready our minds can be. Their whole point was to recognize that most of us actually spend most of, if not all of our time, really worried about that big circle of things over which we have absolutely no control, because we can't change the weather, and we can only influence things so much, and people around us are going to live the way that they're going to live, whether or not we approve of it or not. So what they suggested instead is that we should treat our inner selves, our thoughts, our values, our sense of who we are, as something that we can improve and make stronger and make more prepared for those kinds of difficulties. Just like you would work out your muscles or your lungs, the Stoics would say you could work out your soul. Now, of course, Stoics didn't know about neuroscience or brain chemistry or modern psychology or anything like that. So this isn't a replacement for therapy or medication or other kinds of things that, doctors and professionals do. But it does present this really important challenge to some of our, less helpful instincts. It reminds us that, we get to decide how we meet our challenges, and that there's actually a whole lot of things that are in our control, even when it feels like the whole world is spinning out of control. And that it's up to each of us to make the most of the time that we have. So, good message from some good friends. I hope as we go through today, we can learn some other things from the Stoics as well.
Oh, Mama Bakudala Babe Tandaza.
Oh, Mama Bakudala Babe Tandaza.
Babe Tandaza. Babe Tandaza.
Babe Tandaza. Babe Tandaza.
Oh, Mama Bakudala Babe Tandaza.
Oh, Mama Bakudala Babe Tandaza.
Towards the end of his life, the philosopher and Roman emperor Marcus Aurelius mused to himself about how our real strength as human beings comes in our ability to kindle our passions, confirm our values, and revive ourselves from within ourselves, no matter what is going on in the world around us. He wrote, "What is human weakness? It's what you see all the time. Have this thought ready in your mind for all emergencies that come your way. Everything, sooner or later, ends up the same. You can read ancient or recent history or news about the present world. You can search through cities and talk with old family members. You will learn the same thing, that nothing is new. Everything we can experience is normal and never lasts that long." So, with that in mind, how can our deepest values about how to live ever become irrelevant unless we choose to reject them? And if you do, it is entirely in your power to take them up again and rekindle these true feelings. I can always choose to hold close to my values. So So why would I allow what's going on in the world to disturb my sense of what really matters deep down? What is external to my mind and to my spirit cannot have any effect unless I let them. So take courage to be firm in your convictions. You can live out your values no matter what is going on in the world. And when you do so, you revive your life from the sleep of disinterest, anxiety, and fear.
Each week, we come together as a people. Together, we share stories, love, aspiration. We also share our bounty in ways that express our religious UU values. May this important ritual of sharing abundance remind us that making our world better is a task best shared.
My reflection for this morning's service is Stoicism in a new pandemic age. The disease, the scourge, began in the East. and it swept through cities, towns, and the countryside. It disrupted normal life. It sowed fear among the people, and it created uncertainty about the future. Is this the coronavirus of 2020? Well, it could be, but this is actually the Antonine Plague in the 2nd century of the Common Era during the Roman Empire. It came during the reign of Marcus Aurelius, Roman emperor and Stoic philosopher, hence the name Antonine Plague. The people who died by the hundreds of thousands were subjects of the Roman Empire, and scientists now believe that this plague was actually smallpox. But before it had run its course, more than 1 million Romans had perished. But what about our 21st century pandemic? What does Stoicism offer to us in this, our plague year? Stoicism begins with the principle that we must accept the fact that there are issues, tragedies, and occurrences about which we can do very little. Often we worry about such broad tragedies as war, famine, disease, or poverty. A Stoic would recognize that the individual cannot solve these age-old problems on a grand scale. Instead, Stoicism teaches us that the 4 cardinal virtues, wisdom, justice, courage, and self-control, should be our guide. Our devotion to wisdom and to self-control tells us that even together, we cannot hope to solve all of the worldwide problems like poverty. However, our devotion to both courage and justice also tells us that we simply cannot stand by and do nothing as people, usually non-white and poor, suffer and endure a life likely to be cut short by disease, deprivation, and want. And so, as Stoics, but also as Unitarian Universalists, we choose to act. But we act to make changes that are focused and relatively specific. Here in our congregation, activists like Lori or Eileen have confronted the travesty and the tragedy of mass incarceration nationally by demanding that Cuyahoga County make changes to the deplorable and the even criminal living conditions at the county jail. Conditions that are made even more horrific by this pandemic. The psychotherapist and Holocaust survivor, Viktor Frankl, in his famous post-war book, Man's Search for Meaning, has written that in order to be truly human, we must do 2 things. 1, we must love another person completely. And 2nd, we must reach outside ourselves and extend a hand to others. The Stoic would add to Frankl's advice that we must both use our mind and our heart to train ourselves not to be surprised or afraid that we face a pandemic. People here and elsewhere, both in this time and in earlier times, have faced plagues. But if we are to confront it effectively, and if we are to deal with it for those who depend on us, we must place all challenges in perspective. Pandemics are not new. They have happened before, and not just during antiquity, but here in this country. And by placing pandemics, as frightening as they are, in this perspective, we will get through COVID-19 together. Now, with Stoicism as our partial guide, we can place both tragedies in historical and moral context, and then begin to plan the road ahead after this pandemic is finally behind us. In the end, this measured approach to our current plague is all about love, and that is, after all, what makes us human. Thank you.
Well, good morning. So today is also Mother's Day, and I hope that all of you who can be are either at home with your family, spending time together, or if your family isn't close by, you're able to be in touch. I was thinking about doing a reflection on Mother's Day, maybe talking about the essence of the holiday. I thought about maybe tying it into what the Stoics had to say, if there was any good Stoic mom overlap. I thought, you know what, since I actually have to make a Mother's Day phone call, I thought I'd literally phone it in for this service and invite a guest to our service this morning. Well, hey, Mom.
Well, hey there. How are you?
Happy Mother's Day. Good to meet on Zoom here.
Well, this is the new world, right?
That is true. So obviously, everyone will know that you're my mom because I just told them that. But do you want to introduce yourself beyond just your relationship to me?
Of course. It's an honor to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. Yes, I am your mom. My name is Carole Georgia, and I've been Allan's mom since forever.
Since forever. That sounds just about right. So you are in Florida now. How's the pandemic going?
Well, it's going. Unfortunately, we're in a tough situation down here.
Yeah.
Of course, our economy is based on tourism and quite a bit of international travelers, and certainly this is our season, so it's very much hit us economically. I'm very fortunate. I'm still working, so that's keeping me very busy and out of trouble to some degree. So I'm very fortunate for that. But
so no tourists, but I assume the alligators are having a good time.
The wildlife here is getting just a little out of control.
Well, that is always the case with Florida.
Always.
So thinking back to my fond memories growing up there, what do you remember about our Mother's Days growing up when I was a kid? Were there any special Mother's Days? Did I ever pull anything like that off?
Oh yeah, some really good Mother's Days. I think one of my favorite was when you and your brother had made breakfast for me, and I don't know, waffles was a big thing, and doing that whole breakfast buffet with the flowers and making you stay in bed and then standing there and watching me eat my breakfast, and it was wonderful.
Had a big audience. So it's funny you bring that up, because what I remember is that I got really difficult about, and it wasn't just in all fairness, it wasn't just Mother's Day. It was all of the
Hey, well, wait a minute, stop right there. Did you just say I got difficult? It wasn't just Mother's Day.
Super,
I'm just clarifying.
Definitely. No, I can at the very least own up to my difficultness about that. But so for the benefit of the congregation this morning, how was I difficult about Mother's Day?
Well, you were going through a stage of social justice, and pretty much the world was very black and white for you. And I think that you hit a stage where commercialism and marketing really started to get under your skin. And at the time, you focused on Mother's Day because I think that was just such a huge marketing push to spend money on your mother, to do outrageous spending and such. And I remember at the time having very torn thoughts about it, because once I agreed with you. My mother had a very similar idea for Mother's Day, and Anna Jarvis, who was the woman who founded Mother's Day or got it passed through as a national holiday, also had the very strong feelings about it not being a commercial event. But I also remember kind of feeling left out when all the other kids were doing fancy things for their moms, and Allan was totally ignoring the idea that it was Mother's Day. But I don't know if you knew this, but you always managed to do something special for me.
Well, I'm glad I wasn't absolutely insufferable. That's good.
In that time period. And I remember you saying, I remember somebody, I want to say it was Mrs. Newstreet, said to you, Allan, why don't you celebrate Mother's Day? What's wrong with Mother's Day? And I remember you said to her, you should honor your mother every day. It shouldn't be just one day a year.
Wow, I am so wise. I can't believe I was so wise when I was.
That was so beautiful.
The real question now is, like, how do you feel about looking back about, like, me working out my, like, adolescent angst on a holiday that was, to honor you, like, lots of regrets or.
I had to say I had mixed emotions with it. And because I also felt that sense of pressure. Like, the pressure was on me that I would love everything that you did, and that, I had to it seemed as if the fuss was on the person giving the gift, not so much on the person getting the gift,
That's true. Yeah.
But when you're little and you make your mom a card with big hearts on it, and you bring them a flower, and you tell them that you want to marry them when you grow up, and that all these wonderful things, Mother's Day is wonderful. Now, when you get older, it's kind of the same thing. You really want to hear your child say, you're wonderful, Mom. I really want to talk to you, spend some time with you, and,
So weirdly, this is a kind of a bummer year for Mother's Day. Obviously, we're in the middle of the pandemic and everything. So, in light of all that, what do you want for Mother's Day this year?
I think that I'm so humbled by a lot of my coworkers and neighbors who are moms who have young kids who are doing what they're doing is a Herculean effort. To be a mother now is like you have to be Wonder Woman out there in so many ways. So I had it pretty easy, when I was a young mom with young kids. So I'm really humbled by that. So I hope that, for all the moms out there, I hope that the kids are doing some special things and making it a special day. But I just want to spend time with my kids. That's all I want for Mother's Day.
So on that subject then, while I very much appreciate you joining and chatting for the benefit of all the wonderful people at UUCC, does this count for my Mother's Day call, or should I also call you on Sunday? I should call.
It does not count, yeah.
Okay.
Still need to call, dear. Sorry.
I'll make sure I'll give you a call on Sunday when everyone will be watching this. So, happy Mother's Day. Thanks for chatting, and I'll talk to you on Sunday.
Okay, love you, darling.
Right, love you too. Bye-bye.
For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. nations. We're sisters of mercy and brothers of love. We are lovers of life and the builders of nations. We're seekers of truth and keepers of faith. We are makers of peace and the wisdom of ages. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings. We are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are mothers of courage and fathers of time. We are daughters of dust and the sons of great nations. We're sisters of mercy and brothers of love. We are lovers of life and the builders of nations. We're seekers of truth and keepers of faith. We are makers of peace and the wisdom of ages. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings. We are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are.
Well, it ended up that today ended up being about listening to two group of people who have at least a decent amount of authority when it comes to people who you should probably listen to. One group is the Stoic philosophers, and the other group is moms. So with that, I don't know what else I could possibly say other than to pass on perhaps a bit of timely wisdom from one of those important voices. One of my favorite quotes from a Stoic philosopher is from Seneca, who said, "The greatest obstacle to living is expectation, which depends entirely upon what's happening tomorrow at the absolute loss of what's happening today. The whole future lies in uncertainty. So, live immediately." And with that, I hope you go in peace.